Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We're your hosts, Adriana Amay and
Jackie Sanders. We are two art professionals sharing for the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
we talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you'll be notified when we drop an episode every Tuesday.
So on today's episode, we're delving into something that we've gotten questions about in the past, and it's something that we've covered a little bit here and there on the podcast, but we wanted to have an episode a little bit more in depth about the topic, and it's delegation as a working artist. Now, if you're listening and perhaps you don't do it as part of your job, that is fine. There's value in here too of things that you're like, no, I have to do it myself. And the answer is a lot of what we do in our business, other than the art making itself, we can delegate. And that's kind of what we want to talk about, right? We all have the same amount of 24 hours a day. And as our art businesses grow and develop, there's more and more tasks that get on the table, right? So by embracing that concept of delegation, it can be a game changer because then it allows you to focus more on what you do best while also supporting the art business side of it, right? So in this episode, we're going to be exploring some important bits about delegation, and how it can help, working artists. Again, whether you do this full time or not, doesn't matter. There's still value in here on what can you basically leverage somebody else's expertise and skills and things like that to help you as well. So delegation, just to kind of have a set up a baseline here. It's not a luxury, right? It sounds like, oh, but where am I going to get the money from it? Hold on, we'll get into that. But it's essentially a necessity for growth, right? Particularly for self-employed artists. We wear all the hats. We are HR, we are accounting, we are the CEO, we are the laborer, we are, the kitchen staff. We are literally all the things within our business as a solopreneur or self-employed person, whatever you would like to call it. Even if you do this on the side, chances are that everything for your art business, besides the making art itself, you're probably trying to tackle that too. So we wear all the hats, and with all these different things you have to do, you have to start, or something that could help you, right, with delegation is thinking, okay, what of these things do I have to do? And which ones perhaps maybe somebody else can help me with.
Yeah, and I think that's really the key because, at least in my experience, starting to think about delegating was super overwhelming. I felt like in the beginning of my business because I felt like I just had a million things to do, and I know I didn't have enough time to do all of them, but I felt like I had to do all of them. So, one thing that I love about um, delegation and even just thinking about it, which, as you mentioned, Adriana, I hope this episode kind of helps just get the wheels starting to turn for many of our listeners, is by thinking about delegation, it also forces you to prioritize what is on your to-do list. Because as artists, recognizing that expansion really requires delegation. It's impossible to do everything on your own. And it can actually lead to unlocking new opportunities, which propel your creative career forward. So the biggest thing in terms of freeing up your free time is that it also frees up your mental energy. You're able to focus on your core creative pursuits by delegating some of those other tasks that may be consuming you a lot of your time, consuming your energy, and just that mental space. And outsourcing or delegating that work can also lead to increased efficiency and productivity, not just in your workflow because you have more time to focus on your art making, but also in the process itself. I think we all know that feeling of this is taking me a really long time. And I feel like if someone else were to do it, it would just be quicker. But that just makes it a more frustrating situation. So by leaning into delegating, it actually leads to more efficient work that you're putting out.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's true because there are things like if you know how to build your own website, throwing that as a quick example, and you're only doing it for yourself, chances are you're going to spend a lot more time tweaking it and changing things around than if you would if you were like, this is what I'm looking for. You give it to somebody else and they crank it out, right? But for them, that's their bread and butter. They do it all day long. For you, it's like a one-time thing. added on top of your giant to-do list of multiple varieties of types of things, right? Versus for them, if it's somebody that specializes in that, their workflow is already optimized to work on websites. That's all they do, right? So chances are they're going to be a lot quicker, and they're going to know a lot of like little tricks and things of how things operate that you may not have had the chance or the time to explore, but they do it faster. So that's something to think about. Delegation, it allows for that collaboration. Again, it allows for you to leverage the expertise of others to achieve your goals. Because again, if that's what they do all day, right, then that's saving you from that rabbit hole when they can do it. Also, by giving up, this sounds weird, but stay with me. By giving up to a certain extent control over non-essential tasks, you create space for innovation and exploration in your artistic practice. Like, do you really need to set up, I don't know, I'm going to make up another example. Do you really need to spend a lot of time turning newsletters into blog posts when that's something you can easily teach somebody else to do? And it saves you time. And you might say, well, that's not going to take me a lot of time, except you multiply it by number of newsletters, and then the time adds up, and then before you know it, it's dinner time and you're still working on this thing. So if it's something that you are able to delegate, you're going to save yourself a lot of time, right? Now, as you're listening to us talk about this, you might be going, okay, great, where do I even start? Right. And I know a lot of the concern in talking to other artists, they're like, I'm not sure what I can delegate. Who would I delegate it to? What would that look like? How much would it cost me? Obviously, these are very important questions. So I feel like some of the very first steps that you can take towards delegation doesn't have to be overwhelming. So we're going to give you some examples to keep this as simple as possible to kind of dip your toe into this. So, one of the first things, and this actually leads back to something Jackie said about prioritizing, one of the first things you need to do is have a good old sit down, or I don't know, dictate into your phone, when you have some off time, however you want to do this, or sit down with a notebook. But you need to look at areas of your business where you could benefit from external support. Easy examples, and I feel like almost any artist can identify with these. For example, photography. A lot of the photography we do in our art business, we can do ourselves with a smartphone, right? But to get professional level headshots, or maybe for the muralists out there, they need like a drone footage, but you don't have a drone. Like, maybe it's bookkeeper. I know a lot of artists have a bookkeeper, or web design, things like that, right? Creating a logo. There are things that if they're outside your field of expertise, it's very easy to delegate. Maybe you can do some of it, but it maybe is faster, more efficient, and you actually save up money at times when you let somebody that does that for a living do it for you, right? So those are some things to consider. Um, Another form of delegation that maybe doesn't come to mind right away. Galleries and art consultants, what are you doing? You are delegating part of the sales process when they're helping you promote and sell your artwork so that you have more time creating. So it doesn't sound as maybe some of the other delegation examples, but it is exactly that. You are basically giving up control, maybe it's not the right word, let's say share control over some processes in your business and the ecosystem that makes your art practice and art business, and having somebody else help you with it. That is a type of collaboration, and galleries and art consultants fall in this boat too.
Yeah, I think another thing that comes to mind also is even just outsourcing the production of things like art prints, right? I know many artists that buy the printer and test out inks and test out papers. And if that is something that you enjoy doing and find value in, 100% knock yourself out. However, if you are just thinking about fine art prints in terms of wanting to have another income stream for your future collectors, that is something that you don't necessarily have to invest all the money in up front. It actually will probably save you a lot of money by outsourcing making prints or merchandise to a reputable printing company, freeing you from those logistics of having to have inventory on hand, of having to invest in the equipment up front. And so instead, you can find either a local print shop, a trusted company online to take that headache essentially just off your plate. Another thing that I think is also easy to take off the plate, so to speak, definitely in the world of admin computer work is your digital marketing. So whether it's things like your website or starting your newsletter or social media, you can hire a social media manager to really enhance that online presence and help you reach a larger audience while also giving you additional time to be in your studio. I think the biggest thing when we talk about a lot of these examples, if people are still kind of wrapping their brains around it, is really to think about the two different types of tasks that you can delegate. The first one being things that you already know how to do, and thus you can teach and train someone else how to do it, right? From a digital marketing standpoint, if you already have a social media presence, you can train someone on what kinds of pictures you like to use, how you speak in your captions, giving them content to work with. Or the second type of thing that you can delegate would be things that you have no idea on how to do and you want to become an expert at, or you don't want to become an expert at because you're willing to pay someone else to do that for you. I feel like a very easy example for that being I love being on social media. I love making videos on TikTok or posts on Instagram, and I could delegate that to someone else. But something that I do not have much experience with are things like Pinterest. So that would be something that I know maybe I want to have that as part of my business, but I don't necessarily want to become a Pinterest expert. So I could pay someone who already has that skill set, or the time to become that expert. And then that way I still get the benefits of it without having to actually learn it myself.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love how you mentioned the investment, like maybe for video editing, you don't want to spend the money on Adobe, Premiere Pro or something like that, which is a hefty subscription fee, and then all the hours for you to even learn it, right? Anyways, it's just much easier to say like, okay, I'm gonna pay somebody else to do this part, right? So on some of these that we're talking about, you're going to save money by teaching somebody else to do it. And then on some of them, you're going to invest money in somebody that already knows how to do the thing that you don't have the time to do, right? Or interest to do. But before we get ahead of ourselves, next up, we're going to be talking about getting more hands-on support, bringing that person in and potential challenges with, having delegation. But first, we're going to put a quick word from our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our Level Up Artist courses.
We understand that life as a modern artist can be both exciting and overwhelming. Plus, there's a lot of information out there. So, what do visual artists actually need?
We've spent countless hours of trial and error, weeding through tons of information to find the gold, so you don't have to waste your time going down those endless rabbit holes.
In addition to weekly calls, we have created video course modules to cover everything from artist documents to exhibition prep, social media to technology, sales strategies, artist mindset, PDF resources, templates, and so much more.
Ready to get started? Head on over to levelupartists.com to learn more, get immediate access, and level up your career today.
Welcome back, everyone. So now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that next level of delegation. So once you dip your toes into delegation, considering expanding your collaborative efforts to include more of that hands-on support. Because when you're working with whether a studio assistant in person, a virtual assistant, or even just someone that is helping you a couple hours here and there, it really can be invaluable assistance with managing, especially those day-to-day operations of administrative tasks. Thinking of things like handling communication with clients, maybe galleries or vendors, ensuring that they are getting a timely response and efficiently coordinating with your schedule. Even someone that simply can say, this is when they will expect a response. Maybe, okay, you only do computer work 1 or 2 days a week, but you still want someone to kind of monitor your emails, let you know if there's any fires waiting in your inbox that you need immediate response on, or they can respond saying, we'll get back to you on Wednesday afternoon. That can be huge in terms of building your relationships with outside companies or clients. They can also, in that vein, manage your schedule. So things like appointments, make sure that you are aware of deadlines for applications, when you're delivering artwork, when you need to pick up artwork, really staying organized in making sure that you are hitting all of your scheduled deadlines, but also allowing you to have that mental headspace room of focusing on your creative work. And then one more thing that's really more of the admin side that can be a huge, huge help, especially if you're an artist that is a little bit deeper into their career where you start having multiple opportunities happen at one time. Maybe you have an in-person gallery and also an online store. Having someone that can help you manage your inventory can be so, so helpful. Which at the beginning of your creative journey, maybe you're saying, okay, well, I only have 6 paintings. I don't need someone to help me keep track of these 6 paintings. I can see when one of them are missing. Because I totally was there too, until you keep making art, and then realize I actually don't know which gallery this painting is at. And then you have to deep dive in your email, say like, where is this? So someone that can help you track your inventory, or things like coordinating art packaging, shipping logistics, things that really help you streamline that workflow, that again, just give you more time in the studio is the ultimate goal.
Absolutely. Another example that comes to mind is someone that's helping you out can help you conduct research. They can help you source materials. Like, I need this spiral red. Who has the spiral red by Golden in the gallon size, right? Like, they can help you like do some of that research for you. They can help you with organizing the kind of information you would need for specific applications. So maybe you have an exhibition, several exhibition applications you want to fill out. Well, maybe they can help you organize the information, your artist statements, your headshots, samples of your work, things of that nature. Um, Essentially, like, help you stay organized, kind of like Jackie said, and do some of the legwork for you. That, again, kind of like what we talked about a little earlier, is things you can teach someone. So, going a little bit more specific, think of it this way, and of course, feel free to mix and match, so to speak, or combine these two. If you have someone in person, right, not only like we just said, they can help you with shipping, they can help you with maybe even picking up the artwork, installing the artwork, right? But you also have the ability to build that rapport with that person, that's coming and helping you out. You can also oversee tasks and provide immediate feedback when needed, because they're right there working alongside you. There's also I feel like it's really helpful to have that division of labor. So say it's an installation, it might be like, hey, I'm gonna be up on the ladder. Can you hand me the paintings? Right? Like, I'm gonna put in the nail. Can you hand me the hammer? Like, you can have that immediate feedback in terms of, division of tasks. So I feel like that can be super helpful, even organizing, like, hey, can you empty the drawers on that cubby, and let's go through the art materials and see what we actually don't need, or put them in alphabetical order or in rainbow order, however you want to do that, right? Like, somebody else that can be there for you and help you out. Put D-rings on the back of all these paintings and put wires on them. Super helpful when you can have somebody come in and help you with this stuff. So those are some examples of in person. If it's someone that's virtual, whether they're virtual overseas or they're virtual literally living down the street from you, right? And the arrangement is that they work from home, right? That could be possible. When you go virtual, one of the cool things is usually you'll have a larger talent pool to choose from. It doesn't have to be somebody that lives in the same city as you do. They could live, in the state next door. But a lot of times that comes with reduced overhead costs, because you're not asking them to drive in and drive out and parking and all that kind of stuff, right? They can just log in from home, which also means a lot of times there's more flexibility in scheduling and even the working hours. So if you are working with someone that, say, is on the West Coast and you're East Coast, right? They're still going to be working about 3 hours after you're done, right? So they may catch things that you like forgot, while you were working at 5 p.m. They found it right before they signed off at their 5 p.m. but you're already asleep. And in the morning, you're ready to go. Like, oh, we got this response from this gallery. They need this thing for you, right? And they can help you with that. I know this sounds like a lot, depending where you are, but honestly, it's super duper helpful. So we do have to talk about the other side, of course, right? Because this sounds all hunky dory and beautiful, and it is, but there are some challenges that can come with it. I think the number one challenge is getting over the overwhelm of even wrapping your head around this thing. At least that's what I went through at first. And it was like, what do you mean I'm going to delegate anything to anybody else in my art business, right? Quick shout out to my mental health professional therapist who was like, no, it's healthy to delegate. What big company have you seen where the CEO does everything? No, it's a team. Like this is normal. And as a self-employed person, delegation is actually pretty beneficial. Anyways, so there we are with that. So some of the challenges that can come with this, and I think it's important to kind of put all the cards on the table and think about these two. One of them is going to be overcoming perfectionism, which a lot of us can be a little controlling when it comes to every aspect and facet of our art business. So, overcoming a little bit of that and trusting others to handle tasks with competence and care. You have to trust in the people that you choose for your team. So, whether it's that, bougie photographer you've always wanted, maybe that's a little easier to trust, or the accountant that's helping you do your taxes with all the deductions for your art business, like the person you're selecting to do some of these tasks is someone that you have to trust, right? Or at least build that trust. And you have to get over but I don't know if they did it right. If that's their area of specialty, yeah, you got to let a little bit of that go. I think another one that's easily overseen that is a challenge is effective communication. It's a little bit different when you're working with someone else and they're not like your normal full-time employee situation. Maybe you only have them come into the studio or meet with you virtually a couple hours a week, right? So you don't have that constant interaction. I think over time, it's easy to start almost like assuming like, oh, they know what I want. They don't. Okay. Nobody can read your mind. Like you have to be super clear with instructions, super duper important, and touch base every once in a while on project goals and expectations. Now, when you're only doing all these things for yourself, you're only accountable for yourself and maybe your perception of your audience and your collectors, right? But nobody's really looking that hard. If you didn't post for a day, nobody's like knocking on your door like you didn't post yesterday, right? It's mainly like self accountability. When you are working with another person, you have to be accountable with them too, right? And they have to be accountable with you too. So your communication skills have to be clear because sometimes it'll be easy to be like, but you didn't do the thing. And they're going to be like, what thing? I don't know what you're talking about. So very, very important to set that. Also, setting boundaries and delegating tasks that align with your vision and values. I think this is super important if the person you're working with doesn't work after 8 p.m. or they can't do Wednesdays and Fridays because they don't, they have the kids that day. There's no babysitter, or they don't work weekends, or they don't work before certain hours. Like there's certain things where it's like you're working with another human being or beings if you have a bigger team. So you have to be super considerate of what some of those boundaries are and make them clear for both ways. If you're the one that doesn't want to work on weekends, you need to communicate that, right? Especially if there's action items coming up. So, anyways, I feel like that's a little bit different because when you're the one wearing all the hats, you tell your CEO brain to your HR brain to your accountant brain, like they're all talking to each other all the time because they're technically in the same office, aka your brain. But when you're working with somebody else, communication is key because they can't read your mind as much as we want them to.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think it's definitely that mindset shift that can happen anytime you hire on a team member, whether it's full-time, part-time, just for like a one-time task or on a weekly basis. But as the artist and then maybe the delegator, there is that mindset shift of also just continuously learning and adapting to navigating that new process of delegating creative activities in your business or more of the admin side of your business, that definitely takes time to get used to. So that can be a challenge for many artists, especially when thinking about the in-person assistants versus virtual assistants. Each of them have their unique sets of benefits, but also their unique set of challenges too. So when you think about in-person assistants, of course, they're physically there with you, which is great. There are certain tasks that they can help you with that a virtual assistant can't. However, you're also limited by the pool of candidates in your immediate location, right? There may be higher overhead, potentially scheduling restraints, or just limited flexibility in terms of when they're available, what they can do, and trying to coordinate the day-to-day schedules of outside obligations versus a virtual assistant may be able to be more flexible. Rather than having to be at a certain day at a certain time, you can then have them work while you're working in the studio. They're doing different admin stuff, or just whenever they get pockets in their day, as long as they hit the deadline of Thursday, that's all that really matters, which is great. However, some of the downsides may be there's potential challenges due to time zone differences. If they're in a different time zone than you, they may be asleep while you're awake, or it may be 5 a.m. in the morning when you're texting them first thing about assignments. And so that's a big part of where that communication and establishing boundaries can be helpful in the beginning. There also may be language barriers if they speak multiple languages or a different language, while also needing to communicate detailed instructions for what you're looking for in terms of an outcome. So you may have to overcome that, as well as just trust in building that relationship. Oftentimes, naturally, by having someone that's in person, you have that shared physical experience with them. So there's an inherent trust there that may take a little while to build virtually. Obviously not impossible. And again, virtual assistants have their strengths, but it's something to think about when overcoming those initial challenges of delegation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely, at least for me personally, it took my therapist, thank you, if you're listening, of course, Susan, I love you, and also talking to other artists that do delegate various aspects of their business before I could wrap my head around it. So that's why we wanted to do this episode, kind of like maybe plant that seed of like, you don't have to do every single thing, and chances are you're already delegating some things, like maybe the professional photography or bookkeeping, like we said, but definitely worth looking into to see if there's other things you could potentially delegate or get assistance with. Now, we do want to deep dive a little bit more into this topic. So we're thinking in a future episode, we want to talk a little bit more about building an artist team. Like, how do you find this person? And like, maybe like, how do you handle paying them? Or what kind of tasks do you give them? What if you don't have tasks to give them, but you want to? Like, we'll go a little bit deeper into the topic. So keep a lookout for that. But for this one, we just wanted to plant that seed, do that little introduction, give you some quick examples, and hopefully get the wheels turning, like Jackie said earlier. So it may seem a little daunting at first, but just think about all the time that it's going to free up so you can do what you love most and is normally undelegatable, which is the art making itself. But yeah, take the time to look at which areas of your art practice and your art business could potentially be delegated. This is a rabbit hole worth going into, I promise. Because once you do, and then you can just be like, oh, so and so is helping me install on this day, and then for this other thing, so and so is going to help edit this other part or whatever. Like, I mean, maybe it's the same person, but it goes a little bit deeper than just asking somebody else for help here and there and exchanging a favor. This is more like ongoing support, especially as you try to think of how you expand your artist career. Bringing somebody else, even if it's again a couple hours a week, could make a big difference for sure. So definitely worth looking into. Well, we're gonna go ahead and wrap on that, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode.
As always, our blog will be linked in today's show notes, where you can find episode notes and links to all of our other podcast episodes.
And if you want to stay connected with us in between episodes, share your feedback, or have a question you would like for us to answer on the podcast, you can reach us through social media. I'm at Mayart across all platforms.
And I'm at J. Sanders Studio across all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we're at Level Up Artist on Instagram.
You can also visit levelupartist.com to Get immediate access to templates, resources, and course modules to level up your creative career today.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll talk to you next week.